creativity and the ability to be able to take passion and understanding of how important music can be in a person's life is what my friend Marty Eigen has been able to accomplish. He has developed into a jazz favorite, especially in the neighborhood that he lives in, and in particular in the state of New Jersey. Thank you, Marty, for giving me an opportunity to be able to introduce you to my viewers and give them an idea of how important the artists are in the state of New Jersey when it comes to building an opportunity so that people can see the value of how jazz is in our lives. It's such an important factor that we are able to be a showman and know that the entertainment that we provide is really educational. You have been able to accomplish a great deal of knowledge in the area of music. Let's talk about you, your beginning in relationship to your involvement in music, and why is it so important for you?
Well, it goes back a long time, but when I was a kid, to keep me from playing football, my parents decided that I should have an instrument. So at 9 years old, my grandparents got me a saxophone, a tenor saxophone, and my father was a trumpet player, but so he was very crestfallen when I decided I wanted to play the saxophone. And the truth is, the reason I chose the saxophone was because it was the largest instrument I had ever seen. If I had known about tubas, I certainly would have been a tuba player.
Wow.
Without a doubt. So I took lessons and I played in the junior high school band and the high school band. I got a music scholarship to college to lead the dance band and to play in the orchestra. And I went to Long Island University I graduated in 1963 from Long Island University. And funny story, I couldn't major in music because Long Island University had been involved in a basketball scandal, so they didn't have a music scholarship program. They didn't have a music department, but they allowed they hired 9 guys that got scholarships to recruit musicians. So by the time I graduated, they did have a music department. And I led the dance band, and I had to choose a major. And I had no counseling about what I should choose. And I went to the bulletin, and I opened the bulletin, and it said accounting. So I became an accountant.
Is that right?
If I had opened the bulletin backwards, I would have been a zoologist.
Wow. You just did one of those. That's it.
So in 1963, I started my accounting career with Johnson & Johnson, and from 63 to 65, I worked at Johnson & Johnson as an accountant, playing a little bit of music, but not much. Then in 1968, I moved to Europe, became the director of Africa and Benelux for a European company, Investors Overseas Services.
This is still in financial management?
No, it was marketing.
Marketing.
I decided that the people in marketing had a lot more fun than the people in accounting.
True.
And as a matter of fact, I had a very successful accounting career, but I couldn't keep the books.
Okay.
I never got the debits to equal the credits. So they used to send me to the library.
Okay.
And I wrote all these articles for professional publications, and I wrote for marketing publications. I wrote articles on marketing, accounting, and things like that. So let me see if I remember this correctly. It was a long time ago. So in 1968, I got a job as regional executive for Africa and the Benelux in Geneva, Switzerland.
Wow.
So I first moved to France, and then I lived in Geneva for 3 years. and then moved on to Holland and was the director of an insurance company in Holland called International Verzekeringsmaatschappij, which is international life insurance in Dutch. And interestingly, the general manager of that insurance company played the piano. So he and I used to play out a lot in Holland.
You and the saxophone?
Me and my saxophone.
Okay.
Right. So we played out a lot. And then in '68, I came back and went to work for Seagram as a product manager. So I worked on Park Avenue. It's 375 Park Avenue, and worked for Seagram for 2 years. And in 1973, I decided I had enough.
Okay.
So my corporate career was over and I knew my career was at an end when I used to bring my saxophone to work.
Oh, wow.
And I used to play in the office.
Okay.
I found that the job was very easy and very little was demanded of me. That's when I discovered the people who work the hardest get paid the least. And the people who have all this job satisfaction should be paid less. So as you go up the corporate ladder, my theory is that since you get more job satisfaction, your salary should be reduced. But that's my economic theory. So the people at the bottom of the pyramid should be making the most money, and the people at the top of the pyramid should be making the least amount of money because they get so much job satisfaction. But anyway, so I left and started studying music, and I took courses at Juilliard, Manhattan School of Music, New School, and I studied with a man named Jimmy Giuffre, who was known for his clarinet playing, but he was a very fine saxophone player. And what he taught me, and his whole approach, and I didn't understand it at all at the time, was that play beautifully. It almost doesn't matter what you play, and focus. So he saw music as a meditation. And he approached music by play. So my first lesson with Jimmy was, what's your favorite note? I didn't know what he meant. What do you mean, what's your favorite? So come back next week and tell me what your favorite note is. So I came home and I took my saxophone, with the saxophone right here, and I'm trying to figure what my favorite note is, having no idea what he's aiming at. Anyway, I turned out my favorite note is concert F, G on the tenor saxophone. Okay.
And that's pretty much your.
So I found my favorite note. My favorite note, and it also, as it turns out in later years, that's my favorite key to sing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So your tone.
So it's interesting how that turned out. And then so I went into music business back then, and I formed the famous group of Ron and Marty.
Ron and Marty.
Ron and Marty. Now, we were originally thinking of naming our group Simon and Garfunkel, but we figured that group that name would never sell.
They would have put you under the stage.
Who's going to buy Simon and Garfunkel? So anyway, so we went on the road and we played all the steak and brew circuits. So we went to Albany and Syracuse and I met many famous musicians. I played one gig where Dizzy Gillespie was playing at the hotel, and we were alternating with Dizzy. And so I met all my heroes when I played, and I became a huge fan of Sonny Stitt. I even became a Sonny Stitt groupie.
Wow.
Now, I followed Sonny everywhere, and Sonny used to drink a lot.
Yeah.
And I asked Sonny once, how do you play so beautifully when you drink? And he said, Marty, the secret to playing drunk is practicing drunk.
Because then everything is natural.
No, he was brilliant.
Yeah, normal situation.
And died too young. He was 59 when he died, and he played with Dizzy, and he was a great player and a great mentor. So I had my first opportunity Sonny is playing at the Village Gate, and he said, bring your horn. So I said, You want me to play with you?
Okay.
So the next day I was going to play with Sonny Stitt. I was in a state of terror. I literally could not get out of bed. I was so frightened
Because?
that, so a few days later I saw Sonny, and Sonny said, I thought you were going to bring your sax.
Okay. What do you mean, stage fright, or when you say you were afraid, what happened?
I was afraid because I told Sonny, I said, Sonny, compared to you, I play like a quadriplegic. You know, you play so beautifully, and I can't play with you. And he said something so wise that I've always held it. He said, Marty, if you think you're going to play like Sonny Stitt, you're never going to play like Sonny Stitt. But you know what? I will never play like Marty. And it is so true. As long as you compare yourself to other people, you will always fail.
Wow.
Because there's always somebody who's better than you are.
Wow.
Always.
But you can only be you.
But what you have to aim for, at least I've tried, is to be the best me that I can be.
Be the best me that I can be.
That's,
I like that.
That's really.
Tagline that.
If I'm not living up to my standards, if
Right.
I'm not the kind of person I want to be, then shame on me.
Right.
It's so easy to blame everybody else for our shortcomings.
Right.
That I think if we think more about what our strengths are and what our passions are and what we want to give back, then life can be a much better place.
Wow. In your relationship of building an opportunity to practice and even as much perform with a number of different artists, which instrument do you like to play the most?
The one I'm playing.
The one I'm playing. How many of them do you play?
Well, I play the sax, the clarinet, and the flute. And in the old days when we had Ron and Marty and had very few chords, if Ron had, if the musicians that I played with had to go to the bathroom, I could play the chords, block chords on the piano.
Okay.
So, but no, basically I see myself as a saxophone, flute, clarinetist. I'm a reed player. And they're similar but different, and they all have. And it's very hard to see yourself as a doubler. So when I played shows, and frequently I'd have to have the clarinet in my lap, and I'm playing a few notes on the saxophone, and then I pick up the clarinet and whatever. That's very, very, very demanding, and takes a different kind of skill than to become a great saxophone player or a great flute player or a great. So I'm a master of all. What's the expression? I play all these instruments, but I'm a master of none. Right?
Okay.
I do the best I can, but again, every day to this day, I spend as much time as I can practicing and going back to basics.
I've heard that a great deal from some of the reading that I've done. Shares many of the artists that have accomplished professionalism, that the only way that they got there was to practice. And looking at it from that perspective, the reality behind that concept does make sense. But how do you know when you are really performing well when it's not in an environment that will give you any kind of feedback?
In that sense, I think you have to play for yourself. So you have to be the judge of how you're playing. You have to be the judge. Now, the danger of that, it seems to me, is being too critical. I know world famous musicians who are never satisfied with the way they play. So they live in a constant state of discontent. Now, I find myself, I'm much kinder to myself, and I forgive myself more easily for my flaws than my marvelous friends who are, so incredibly talented, and I'm honored to be able to play with them. But the fact that they allow me to play Marty with them has taught me more than anything I can speak of. So really, the key, I think, to music is listening. Not playing so much as listening closely to the other players, the greats, people who you want to emulate, people who you know, if I say Sonny Stitt was my man, but you know, whoever, if you're a singer and you like John Coltrane and you like Johnny Hartman. I mean, Johnny Hartman to me is the master of vocal. He's tremendous. Some people like Jimi Hendrix. And Duke Ellington made a statement that I relate very strongly to. There's only two kinds of music, good music and bad music. And you define what that is. So I play with funk funk musicians. I have friends who are funk musicians. And my thing is I've always been open to listening. So when I traveled around the world, I've always brought an instrument, usually my flute. And I played in Africa, and I've played in Europe, and I've traveled around Europe, and I played in Mexico. And I've had the good fortune of being able to sit in. I was in a trip to Russia, so when it was the Soviet Union, and I played with this incredible Russian guitarist who loved Louis Armstrong. And this was in the day of communism in the Soviet Union. And this guy, I said, well, let me send some records. He loved, so I said, I'll send some records for the set. He said, please don't send records because I'll be on the KGB list.
Oh, wow.
So the friend I made, you know, he didn't want me to communicate with him for fear that he would get in trouble.
Right.
For having
when you're traveling to different customs, to say the least. Different countries have different customs, and you have to be cognizant to make sure you do not, you know, get into a situation where you're abusing it or you're giving the wrong impression. But if you're tuning in, we're here with Mr. Marty Eigen. Eigen. Marty Eigen. And Marty is a member of the band Amani. The Amani band is principally located here in New Jersey. And, you know, Marty, in your creation of Amani, I'm sure that it was a culmination. I always reflect back to my first experience, and it was my very first experience performing, and you performed with me. And I like the concept that you just shared with me, be the best you, because I asked you to do Don't Misunderstand. And then I said, well, you know, listen to how this particular player plays it. And you came back and you played it the way you were comfortable with. And we really made a major impact. And it was my first opportunity sharing that relationship with, you know, a person of your level. And it gave me a lot more inspiration to want to continue. When you are involved in building a relationship with other musicians or vocalists, where do you find your best comfort?
To me, more important than the music is a person's heart, is their ability to love. Amani, the word Amani we came up with, is Swahili for the word peace. And when we formed the band, I was sitting with my grandson, who was 16 at the time, and I always wear dashikis when I play.
Oh, really? For what reason?
Because we're an international group.
Okay.
There's no borders, there's no boundaries. I don't think of us as a jazz band at all.
Really?
No, we play the music that people want to hear. Because I think there's a responsibility as a musician to the audience. That a lot of musicians, far too many musicians, get so involved with the technical capacity, and they're marvelously technically, their ability is phenomenal, but many people don't absorb that. They don't appreciate it. If they go to a concert hall to hear a particular musician, that's what they're there for. But many times, if you play in a club, people are there to have a good time. And if they have a good time, they'll think your music is terrific. And if they have a bad time, they'll think your music stinks. So it's not so much how you're performing, it's how you make a person feel.
Wow.
So if you can convey the feeling, and what I try to convey is my love of the music
I see.
and the other musicians that I'm playing with.
Wow.
So all of the musicians in our band, there's a musician, Rio Clemente, who is, I always say, is the only person I know who says I love you more than I do.
Okay.
I mean, because the truth is, I try as best as I can to love everybody I touch. I'm not always successful, I have to admit, but I'm striving to try to convey this feeling. When I play my best is when I'm not nervous.
Well, what keeps you from being nervous?
Playing with my friends.
Oh, okay.
So when
So audiences don't really tick you off. When I'm performing, I am cognizant of my audience, and you're right. If the music is not as comforting, I'm uncomfortable. And it really reflects upon my attitude. So the problem that I have is, what is my audience identifying to? What do they see? Do you blank out your audience and just...
Well, when I used to play at clubs, and it was so noisy you couldn't hear the changes. So you're playing and the happiest crowds are very noisy.
Okay.
So you have to be able to zone out the audience in one hand to be able to listen to what the other musicians are playing, and this takes tremendous effort.
Yeah, it does.
And so when I first did it, I played with Carrie Jackson has a regular thing at 16 Prospect in Westfield,
Right.
Wonderful venue, and people come there to have fun. And Carrie does a magnificent job in keeping that going. But when I first started playing there with Carrie, I found, how do you hear each other?
Oh, wow.
So to be able to really focus on Carrie's singing and the accompaniment, the chord structure and the basis of the tune, took tremendous effort. If I incorporated the audience into that, I would have been totally confused.
I see.
So my first thing was to really and this is probably a big weakness of mine, I like playing with my friends.
When you say you like playing with your friends, and you mentioned Carrie, and obviously we're both alumni of the Jazz Vocal Collective that she has put together. That's how we met.
Right.
And the ideology of the concept of being able to perform in front of your peers has really made an impact on my life. How did you feel when you were a part of that ensemble?
When I was down in the dumps, when I was depressed with the world situation, I would go to Newark to go to that jazz collection to be among my friends. So it was more about the human contact for me than the music. And the fact that there were such incredible musicians sitting around a table having the time of their life playing for each other, it just made my heart soar.
It's amazing that you would say that, because many of us don't play instruments, but you really respect the vocalist as a musician.
Oh, to me, the vocalist is a musician, and much of the music, I've come to this point that when I do concerts which have a theme, like we're doing concerts, a number of concerts coming up, Marty Gras, then the theme, the music is important, and we're doing the music, but we have people dancing in the aisles. So the objective is to get everybody involved, and I try to approach every gig as a party. We're holding a party, and we would like to include you in the party, but basically I see it as a musician, as a party for me and my musician friends who are offering this to the audience, and if they get it, then you have this time of your life. We just did our best ever sellout concert at the Watchung Arts Center for the holiday show. and people were dancing in the aisles, and it was so much fun. And then after that, we have a Meet the Musicians reception, so everybody gets to meet the musicians and talk to them, and there were young people in the audience. And what I'm striving for so hard, as part of my mission in music, is to get the young people involved, because the young people don't hear this music, so it's like strange and foreign to them. I formed a group with my son, who plays guitar, and my 2 grandchildren. At the time, my granddaughter was 11, and my grandson, she sang, and my grandson was 13 or 14. I guess he was 13. He was 13. And we formed a group called the Eigen Experience.
The Eigen Experience.
And it was my son, my 2 grandkids, and me.
Okay.
And my sister holds art shows up in Woodstock, Connecticut. And we went up there and we performed. And nothing is more thrilling than to play with your grandkids.
Yeah.
Now, I have no idea how good they are.
I try to get my grandson to play tennis with me, and I'm working on it.
It's the best of life.
Wow.
To experience through music, and I had this with my father.
Right.
My father and I, we sat in a hot Brooklyn apartment in our undershorts, because it was so hot, playing music. And my father loved John Philip Sousa. He played the trumpet in his high school band.
Okay.
And they played all these John Philip Sousa marches. So I would play my clarinet, my father would be playing his trumpet, and we'd be playing John Philip Sousa marches to the distress of all our neighbors.
So you grew up in New York?
I grew up in Brooklyn.
Where were you born?
I was born in the Bronx.
What part of the Bronx?
Well, I guess it was a place called Nelson Avenue.
Yeah.
So it wasn't far from Yankee Stadium.
Right.
That area.
Yeah, I grew up in the Bronx.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Where were you from?
Yeah, the Forest Projects, Claremont Projects. I was over in Castle Hill. I was all over the place. But I was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Okay. My memory, and this goes back to 1945. I was born in 1942.
Okay.
So in 1945, there was a building in the Bronx on Nelson Avenue that I swear had a swan that they had a moat, and the swan used to swim around the building. Now, over the years, I wasn't sure if I imagined that.
Okay.
Or if that really happened.
Right.
But I swear that there was a swan. So a few years ago, I met somebody, and we were talking. I met this person actually when I was traveling in Uzbekistan in the Middle East. I met this person, and turns out they grew up in the Bronx, and they grew up on Nelson Avenue.
And you asked them that
I
question.
said, was there a swan? And they said, oh yeah.
It really was one. Oh,
there
wow.
was really a swan. So
That's
how the
amazing.
neighborhood has changed.
Yeah, well, please, you can go in a number of areas in the Bronx now, and a lot of things have changed, but it's for the best, and that's so important in relationship to being able to identify like similar. Because did you go to the Brooklyn campus or?
I went to the LRU Brooklyn campus.
You did? So did I. Yeah, I was a member of
What
the
year
LRU
were you
Brooklyn.
there?
Oh, God, please don't even start that. Around 78, 79.
Okay, well, I was there.
You was gone, long gone.
I graduated in 1963.
Yeah, right. It was a big change too. The dormitory. I don't even think the dormitories.
Well, I've been back to visit, and
God, it looks like a
very
mini
dear friend of mine, wonderful
community
musician, became
now.
the head of the music department.
Oh, is that right?
A guy named Bob Aquino,
Oh, really?
and he's been friends of mine for 50 years.
Right. Have you ever taught music at all?
Yeah.
You did?
Oh, yeah.
When did you do that?
After I left the business world, I had to make a living. Hark. Very unfortunate time in my life. So I taught, and I taught at Gregory's Music Store in Plainfield.
Oh, really?
A friend of mine owned Gregory's Music
So
Store.
you at the point when you left the Bronx.
When I left the Bronx, I moved to Brooklyn.
And then after Brooklyn.
After Brooklyn, I moved to New Jersey to work for Johnson & Johnson.
Oh, okay. And then you traveled.
and then I traveled after that.
And then you came back to
And,
Jersey.
and I came back to New Jersey.
I got you now. So
Okay,
go
I
on.
had a house in Plainfield.
Okay.
I lived in Plainfield, and I moved in with my second wife, and we lived in Plainfield, New Jersey for many years. I still love Plainfield.
Well, you're not that far from it here.
No,
You
well,
know, you're in
this
Watchung.
I consider this Plainfield North. Actually, I don't want to get into politics, but I'll tell you some funny stories about Watchung, New Jersey. Watchung, New Jersey voted for Hillary by 1 vote.
Oh, really?
And for the first time in the history of Watchung, there is a Democratic mayor and 2 assemblywomen.
Oh, is that right?
So for the first time in history, I'm very proud because I was involved in that.
In the whole
campaign,
process,
as
yeah.
best as I could.
Okay.
I had some involvement in that campaign. So I'm very proud. And these young women are delightful. They're both, one is pregnant, one has a baby coming.
Is that right?
And they're such fire eaters. Look, my generation is dealing with health issues mostly. So it's really imperative that the young people get involved. And that's why I try to get them involved in music to the best of my ability. But I had about 40 students, and I taught clarinet and saxophone and flute.
Okay.
And I think, actually, the cost at the time was $5 a lesson.
Wow.
It was $5 a lesson.
You seem to have a residency at the Watchung Art Center.
Yes.
And you have done a number of different engagements with Rio Clemente. Let's talk a little bit about that relationship and how it has really grown.
Okay. One of my many careers, I sold insurance. And back in 2003, I met the man who was the president of the Watchung Art Center. And since I had a lot of difficulty talking about insurance, I always wound up talking about music. That was the secret to my success.
Gave you an opportunity to sell that insurance, right? Oh, you really are. We're on the same plane,
So I talked about music, and Klaus Cardinal, who was the president and a very, very dear friend of mine from Germany, he bought long-term care insurance to me. He says, well, why don't you have your band play at the Watchung Art Center? So I said, that would be fabulous. At the time I had an octet, and we called ourselves the Beacon Hill Jazz Band.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
Okay, we were the Beacon Hill Jazz Band, and it was an octet, and I had all the music of Dave Pell.
Okay.
So Dave Pell had this marvelous octet. He's from Brooklyn. Dave Pell was from Brooklyn, and when I wanted to do this, I was out in California, and I met Dave Pell. I had a son who lives out in California, so I met Dave Pell, and I bought his music. I bought maybe 100 arrangements. At the end of the Beacon Hill musicians. The Beacon Hill Jazz Band, we had 250 arrangements, and just marvelous stuff. Our singer was Nancy Nelson. Anyway, so we played our first concert at the Watchung concert on December 2003. So we just finished our 15th. We've just had 15 years of performing holiday concerts at the Watchung Art Center. We've done 46 concerts there.
Really?
Yeah, and
that's amazing. Yeah.
46 concerts, and I'm on the music committee.
Okay.
So I see if we can get people in. And the big problem with running an art center is, in the old days, it was the art center's responsibility to bring people in. So the musician would show up. Now, if a musician doesn't have a following, the places don't want them. So when you go to like SOPAC or whatever art thing, they say, do you have a following? And then you mail to, so it becomes the responsibility of the artist not only to perform the art, but also to bring the audience in.
Okay.
So that's the big problem. So today, I'm on that committee, and we do what we can do. We have 4 concerts coming up very shortly. with one young woman, Leonika Schubel, who played with my band the first time when she was 10.
Really?
She's a child prodigy.
Right.
She's magnificent. She's Nick Schubel, Papa Nick's daughter. His older daughter is studying opera at State University in New York.
Right.
So anyway.
That's interesting that you would say that, because a lot of new artists, such as myself, have a hard time. And I was talking to Patricia Walton, and she was sharing with me, like, I had asked to be booked at a particular location, and she says, well, she'll probably give you a chance, but it's going to take about 2 or 3 years, because that gives you enough time, if you are serious, to build your audience and to ensure that they're not just booking somebody who's going to be in, an open place with no one there. And, you think about it, it takes a great deal of marketing to become a successful artist.
Well, one of my many jobs was I was director of marketing for these companies. So I have a background in marketing. And much of it is all about marketing. So our email list now is 2,506. And at one point
Really?
I had it up to over 4,000. But
And
people
your
drop out,
mailing
people
lists are
change it.
basically the ones that have come to the performances, and you just continue
Or
to
people
increase
who
it.
I've obsessively talked to.
Oh, really?
I
Yeah.
hardly ever meet somebody without handing them a card.
Okay.
What do you do? I'm a musician. I play with this band, and here's our website. So go to musicbyamani.com and hear our band play. And you never know when something will turn into. We've played weddings, we've played funerals. I say we play weddings, divorces, and people say, well, what kind of music do you play? And I will say, what kind of music do you like? And they tell me whatever it is.
Dialogue,
That's exactly the music we play.
That's exactly what we do.
How did you nail it
Right.
on the head? Because when I used to say jazz,
Wow.
many people would say, well, I don't really like jazz.
Okay.
And then I would get into a discussion, well, what music don't you like? Because all of American music has its foundation in jazz.
And most people get the impression from an experience that jazz is just a method in which people have been able to identify the kind of music that has been played, but it's an art form. For instance, when I'm working with Carrie says, try to, make your presentation, multifaceted in a sense, see if you can get some blues in it, work on your areas, R&B, changing the tempo of the song.
Right.
It's about music.
Right.
We call it jazz, but it's about music.
Well, I think that many people would be well spent to drop the term jazz. So, for example, I'm a member of the Jersey Jazz Society.
Right.
And I jokingly say they should change the name to the New Jersey Music Society. And I'm only half joking, but the point is that I don't know where it came from, but when bebop was popular, and then John Coltrane, who is this genius,
Icon, yeah.
Genius of a player and can play the most beautiful lines imaginable. A lot of people think of jazz as frenetic music. And when I first met my wife, she said,
Thanks, define that, frenetic, so our audience can understand. Frenetic music.
Frenetic. It's
all over
busy,
the place.
busy
Yeah.
music.
Like fast.
Fast and busy. Right?
Demonic, even in some cases.
And when I first met my wife, she said to me, look, I got something to tell you. I don't like jazz.
Wow.
So I said, okay, well, what is it you don't like? She says, too many notes.
Okay.
And she plays piano, and we've played together, and she plays classical. Her background is classical music. Jazz is American classical music. And one of the musicians in my band, in the early band, said, we play museum music.
Okay.
So,
Or elevator music.
well, it's not. Well,
really-
to some people, it's elevated
Yeah,
music.
yeah,
And quite, my wife much prefers elevated music
Okay.
to jazz. how she defined jazz.
Right.
And over time, she's become a major jazz lover.
Okay.
Because they say, look, jazz is what there's so many different forms and so many different kinds that you could find exactly the kind of jazz that fits you. So one size does not fit all. And trying to determine what it is your audience wants. So when I book a private party or a gig like that, I will ask the person, what kind of music do you want us to play? What do you like? What are the artists that you appreciate? And then we try to give them the kind of music with playing our interpretation of what they like. So if I play a James Taylor tune, you know, the singer in a band doesn't sound like James Taylor.
Right.
But we'll sing, I've Got a Friend. We'll do a James Taylor song. And not derogatorily. I mean, you have to value the music. If you think of this as junk,
right,
then it's going to sound like junk.
Yeah. So you have to show
You
that
know,
you have
you
a
mentioned
passion
Patricia
for it.
Walton before, and she's in a group called Impact, and a number of friends of mine are in that group, and you know, they play funk, and that's a completely different style. And if I would not play with them when I do, or play when I have the opportunity to, you know, to sit down with Clarence Conover, and play with them, if I disrespected their music,
Right.
then I shouldn't be playing it.
Right. You shouldn't even be a part of it. Let's get back to Rio Clemente.
Rio Clemente, yes. What do you want to know about Rio?
Well, you talked to me, you shared with me that you're working on a project with him.
Yeah.
Where did your relationship start with him, and how far is it going?
Okay, well, Rio played at the Arts Center. So Rio came into the Arts Center. I didn't know Rio at all. I know his background. Rio is on the Morristown Hall of Fame. And he did a regular gig. A few years after I started at the Arts Center, he started doing a regular gig at the Arts Center. He played there 4 times a year. And my band played there 4 times a year. So I started going to his concerts. And he was so far advanced that he never came to my concerts at first. But then we became friends. And with the project we're working on is he's doing a love concert for Valentine's Day concert in February at the Watchung Arts Center. And I'm going to play it on 2 tunes. It's about his trio. So I very much see myself now as a sideman. And my goal is to augment the music of the people that I'm playing with.
Okay, okay.
And every once in a while I get an opportunity to play something. So with Rio, I'm going to be playing two tunes that I'll be featured on.
Okay.
If I play it on any other songs, I'm definitely not the feature. And which brings me to something that I don't like about jazz musicians in general. The tunes are played too long. So the idea of a guy playing 5 outrageous choruses put people to sleep.
Just to keep going and on going.
So play one chorus.
And then back off.
And then back off.
Don't let me have to tell you to go, you know. And, you know, it's interesting that you would say that because at Carrie's birthday party, I was, you know, she asked me to come up and sing a song. And I you know, I'm not used to a musician jumping in because, you know, we, in the collective, there's so many singers that I try to reduce those solos, those music solos. So what happened was that there was a horn player that was there. And when I went into the part where I allowed some musicians to get a piece of it, he wanted to jump in and play his horn. And like, oh, sure, go ahead and play your horn. And like, I'm standing there, and I'm standing there, and I'm standing there, and it's like, well, when are you gonna just play the whole song now? And I had to walk up and tap him on the shoulder and say, hey, guy, it's time, But it's amazing that you would bring that up to the point that there has to be some respect and relationship to how you're improvising and bringing musicians to be a part of it. But it reflects upon the whole relationship that you're building with the individuals. And certainly, I want to encourage my viewers to participate in many of the events that you will be having. And hopefully one day we'll get another chance to work together, because I appreciated it, and I'll look forward to another opportunity.
Okay, well, one thing I want to say, check out the Watchung Arts Center website, just Google it, and it lists all the concerts that are coming up. So we just did a concert, which was scheduled, that got canceled because of bad weather, of Alexis Morass.
Okay.
And she is the next Whitney Houston.
That's awesome.
She is awesome.
Yeah.
And the first time, last year, she was 15. I think she's 17 now.
Okay.
She's 17 now, but she was at Amateur Night at the Apollo, which she won twice, and with Steve Harvey. And she's just a phenomenal.
Just somebody that would definitely be enjoyable.
Yeah. So anyway, they put on great shows, and all of them come with my money back guarantee.
Okay.
So anybody who comes to a concert and if not happy, fully happy with the performance, ask me, and I will gladly refund their money. And
Amani is also performing, and you can also go to the website, which is at.
Well, you can go to the best thing to do is to go to musicbyamani.com.
Okay. And when you go there, you'll find a litany of different projects and activities that will be going on with this great, accomplished musician. Thank you, Marty. I really appreciate it.
I do, too.
All right?
Thank you.
All right. Have fun. And thank you for tuning in. All right. Okay, buddy.
Hey, okay.
Worked out. Worked out pretty good.
Okay, I didn't even have time to get into the Musicians Guild.